I'm Dan Canobbio, Inside Boxing Live, and today we're talking about the 5 biggest fights that never happened since 1990. First up is Lennox Lewis versus Riddick Bowe. This was the fight to make in 1992. Riddick Bowe had just come off a thrilling win over Evander Holyfield, where he picked up the undisputed heavyweight title. We're talking about a guy in Riddick Bowe who was 25 years old, who was fluid, powerful at the height of his powers. These two had fought just 4 years back at the 1988 Seoul Olympics that ended controversially with Lennox Lewis getting the gold medal, so surely they would run it back, right? Over in the UK, there was a guy by the name of Lennox Lewis knocking everyone out. He was powerful, but also calculated. He was climbing the ranks, and he had a fight with Razor Ruddock for the #1 contender spot for Bowe's WBC title. And what did Lennox Lewis do? He disposes of Ruddock in just 2 rounds. At this point, it was a fever pitch to make Bowe versus Lewis in the pros. The Bowe Holyfield Lewis Ruddock fights were part of a mini tournament where the winners would square off against each other for the undisputed heavyweight title. So Lewis emerges from one side, Bowe emerges from the other side. HBO had set up a $32 million purse for this fight between Bowe and Lewis. That's when Bowe's manager, Rock Newman, got involved, and he said, all right, that $32 million, 90% of it has to go to my guy in Riddick Bowe. Of course, Lennox Lewis' side said, no, that's absolutely ridiculous, and counteroffered. They went back and forth. They could not come up with a deal. Finally, this saga ends in a very bizarre but memorable way when Riddick Bowe holds a press conference and he dumps the WBC title into the garbage, relinquishing that title and putting a fight with Lennox Lewis up in smoke. They would never go on to fight. Next up is Mike Tyson versus George Foreman. It's hard to believe that these two paths did not cross. Despite being separated by 18 years, we're talking about two of the biggest and hardest punching heavyweights in the world. By 1987, Mike Tyson was at the height of his powers. We're talking about highlight reel knockouts. Arguably the most famous athlete in all of the world, printing money right now. Mike was on top of the world. Now, George Foreman, a hero of the past in the 60s and 70s, had been out of the ring for a long time, 10 years to be exact, and he was starting his comeback trail in 1987. He fought 5 or 6 times in 1987. He fought 9 times in 1988, and all those fights ending by knockout. Now, George Foreman made it very clear in his interviews after these fights. He wanted to win back the heavyweight title that he lost to Muhammad Ali in 1974, and he wanted to do so by beating Mike Tyson. At least, this is what he was saying publicly. Because behind the scenes, Muhammad Ali was in George Foreman's ear saying, do not fight Mike Tyson. This kid hits hard. He's hungry. But Foreman wasn't listening to that. He would go on to win some more fights in the late 90s when, of course, Mike Tyson was still defending his title and still doing Mike Tyson things. Fast forward to 1990. Mike Tyson's still on top of the world. That is until he loses in spectacular fashion to the 42-1 underdog Buster Douglas. So you would think a Tyson versus Foreman fight would be out the window. No, they still kept negotiating. They still kept an eye on the prize here. For Tyson, he was going to rebuild his image and work up to a fight with Foreman. Once again, so we thought. The fight never came to be. Mike Tyson would rehabilitate his image after that Buster Douglas loss by taking on lesser opponents before ultimately going to prison for 3 years. For Foreman, he had to move on from Mike Tyson. He fought Evander Holyfield where he lost, eventually winning the world title in 1994 when he knocked out Michael Moore. For this fight, it just turns out neither guy really wanted to fight each other. Both guys were scared of the other. George Foreman would go on in future interviews to say that I wanted nothing to do with Mike Tyson. Of course, Mike Tyson had an infamous moment with Don King when Don King was pushing for this fight, and he stormed out of the meeting and said, I don't want to fight that guy. He's too big. He's too powerful. Mike Tyson versus George Foreman. Never happened. Juan Lopez and Yuriorkis Gamboa, what a saga. Now, there are probably bigger fights that you could put on this list, but none signifies more the pitfalls of the current boxing landscape and letting fights over-marinate. And I say over-marinate because this is the fight synonymous with that word, as boxing fans cannot stand, because it was Bob Arum who said, you know what, it's a great fight, Lopez versus Gamboa, but we got to let it marinate more. We got to build it into a bigger fight. That ended up being a very bad thing. Juan Lopez and Yuriorkis Gamboa became a cautionary tale because back in 2011, they were two of the best featherweights in the entire world. Their stars were ascending. They were both signed to Top Rank. Now, you would think there's no reason why we would get this fight. But basically what it came down to was Top Rank Bob Arum and their matchmakers simply didn't believe that Lopez could beat Gamboa. Gamboa had a decorated amateur career. He was just ahead of Lopez where he was there. But the thing with Lopez, what he had going for him was his Puerto Rican descent. And this is a top-ranked company that promoted Miguel Cotto, that promoted Felix Trinidad. It is very important to have a Puerto Rican fighter on your roster that could sell out the Garden, that can appeal to that fan base. And they thought that Juan Lopez, despite his shortcomings in the ring, could cash in down the line in big fights, just not against Gamboa. Now, time would show that neither guy was really as good as advertised, as Lopez was knocked out by Orlando Salido in 2011, and Gamboa had to go up to 140 and fight Terrence Crawford to get his big fight, which he ultimately lost. Fast forward to 2018, both guys passed their prime, no longer affiliated with Top Rank or a big network. They co-headlined an independent pay-per-view with the winners saying they were going to square off. We were finally going to get this fight in 2018. Both guys won, and we still never got it. Forever, this fight here, Lopez versus Gamboa, will be a cautionary tale in over-marinating. Felix Trinidad and Shane Mosley, both fighters were ranked number 1 and number 2 by the Ring Magazine in the pound-for-pound rankings. Both fighters had huge wins over Oscar De La Hoya, with Mosley's a little more decisive than Trinidad's, but they were wins nonetheless. These two were on top of the world. Now, Shane Mosley understood fully how much money there was to be made with a fight against Trinidad. It was Trinidad who was skeptical. It was Trinidad who wanted to test the waters at 160 pounds. Trinidad would go on to fight Bernard Hopkins at middleweight. He lost that fight and it derailed his career. He would only fight 4 more times after that, losing the final 2 bouts of his storied career. As for Mosley, he would go on to lose to Vernon Forrest, but he did rehabilitate his image and his career a little better than Trinidad did. He got fights with Floyd Mayweather, but for that moment in time, when Mosley and Trinidad were on top of the world, we never got to see who was the best. Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, a saga that is still going on to this day. And I also think that the final nail has been put in the coffin of this fight. You got to go back to 2017. Deontay Wilder is 2 years and 6 knockouts into his reign as heavyweight champion. Keep in mind, this is an American heavyweight champion fighting for the upstart PBC at the time. He's emerging as the face of boxing. He's emerging as the face of the PBC. He has highlight reel knockouts. He's bringing heavyweight boxing back in the U.S. in a very, very big way. On the other side of the pond, you got Anthony Joshua, national hero, Olympic gold medalist, selling out stadiums all over the UK. You can make a case that no fighter helped legitimize the British boxing scene more than Anthony Joshua. Now, AJ climbs the ladder and he positions himself for a heavyweight title fight against Vladimir Klitschko, a true passing of the torch moment. Joshua comes off the canvas to knock out Klitschko in an instant thriller to become heavyweight champion of the world. Now, AJ would go on to collect more belts along the way. So at that point in time, the only 2 heavyweight champions in the world were Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. They were both undefeated. We're talking 50+0 combined between them with so many knockouts. It is so clear that this is the fight to make in the heavyweight division. But this is a video about fights that were never made. We're talking about network squabbles. We're talking about egos. We're talking about money getting in the way from this fight never happening. Deontay Wilder would take on Tyson Fury, seemingly out of nowhere, as Fury was out of the ring since 2015. This fight went down in 2018, and we know what happened in this one. Fury comes off the canvas in round 12. They fight to a draw, but many believe that Wilder had lost that fight. So Wilder's image took a big-time hit. Around the same time, in 2019, Anthony Joshua loses in spectacular fashion, gets knocked out by Andy Ruiz, a massive upset in his debut at Madison Square Garden. Big-time blow to us ever seeing Joshua and Wilder in the ring. Of course, Wilder would go on to a trilogy with Tyson Fury, where he was stopped in the second fight. He was stopped in the third fight. Anthony Joshua would lose fights to Alexander Usyk, but he is on the rise, Anthony Joshua. And in the year 2023, we finally think we might get this fight because of the backing of Saudi Arabia and their crazy investments in the sport. They want to still pit Anthony Joshua, who's rehabilitated his image off of several wins after the Usyk fight, versus Wilder, who had 1 knockout over Helenius, but was still a big name. We're finally going to see AJ versus Wilder in the year 2024. In steps Joseph Parker. He upsets Deontay Wilder, who did not look good. Anthony Joshua is now going to fight Francis Ngannou. we never get to see Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder.